So let's talk about why current bare knuckle boxing is not really what some of us think of as bare knuckle boxing. As we've discussed in the past, English boxing has quite a history, and a very interesting one at that. And we all know that boxing as a sport kind of started off as even kind of almost a stand-in for dueling, and was originally little more than a handshake agreement to what constituted fair play until rules started coming in. And since then, there have been several rules adaptations. There are kind of 3 to 4 distinct eras of rules. Really, I would say 3, but we can say the modern era is kind of a 4th because things are even different from what they used to be. But now this sudden return of the bare knuckle format was something that many of us got excited about, but it hasn't quite got to where it needs to be. So some of the complaints that I have and complaints that other people in the community have as well is, number one, they should not be allowed to wrap their wrists either, right? Calling it bare knuckle, but they're allowed to wrap all the way up to just leaving their knuckles exposed is kind of like bare knuckle in name only. From a modern perspective, the entire idea of going back to bare knuckle is, one, it is safer, which has actually been demonstrated because people have to pick their shots more. And 2, it also forces people to use better technique because they do not have artificial supports. In fact, one online comment disputing this said, "Well, I don't have a problem with the wrist wraps because I mean, if you can just deliver more power, why wouldn't you?" And that's an argument for working within the rules versus changing the rules. Working within the rules, yeah, sure. If the rules allow it, why wouldn't you? But on the same side of things, maybe the rules need to change, because if you just say, well, if it allows more power, why wouldn't you do it? Then you start going in, well, why don't we allow further support? Why don't we allow body armor? Why don't we allow, all sorts of compression gear? Like, at some point, why don't we just make it robot boxing, right? That's kind of not the point of the thing in the first place. What we really want to see, right, when we see combat sports, what are we really talking about? We're talking about a skill versus skill contest where we remove variables like size differential, environment, things like that, where things are somewhat standardized and measured so you can really sit there and say whose training is better. And that is actually a pretty cool thing. I think that combat sports are great for that. And so this idea of, well, why not just allow more support from a physiological, anatomical perspective? It's just like, because then you're starting to dehumanize it. I don't want a dehumanized sport. I want a human sport. It's the same reason that we don't like steroids in it, despite the fact that everybody knows that at every level of competition there is performance-enhancing drug usage. The reason that it's against the rules, the reason that many of us do not like it, is the fact that it starts to dehumanize the competition. You are no longer pushing yourself to the limits of your body. You are doing so with external help. And yeah, the lines are blurry on what constitutes as a performance-enhancing drug and what just constitutes as normal. Obviously there's a lot of fuzzy lines there and whatnot. But the fact is that at least me and some of the people that I talk with, we actually want to see the human potential, the raw human potential taken to 11. We don't really want to see the external supports. It's kind of the same difference between like why there is raw powerlifting and why there's equipped powerlifting. There's nothing necessarily wrong with equipped powerlifting, but some of us don't really care what you can do in a modern multiply suit. What we want to see is what you can do with nothing more than, a belt and simple knee sleeves. And I'm not a fan of belts and knee sleeves, but they're not really adding anything significant to the lift. They're more here. So, when we get down to it, I want to see those wrist wraps absolutely gone, because I really want to see people exploring better technique and better strategy and better tactics. Now, here's the other side of it, and this is the real reason why the modern bare knuckle sport is not the same as the old bare knuckle sport. People forget that boxing was not always just a game of punching. That was changed in the Marquess of Queensberry rules in 1867. And bare knuckle culture did keep on going after that for a little while, and then it started going underground as legalities changed. But one of the things that we need to remember is that all the way up to right before the Marquess of Queensberry rules, people were allowed to do stand-up grappling. You just weren't allowed to fight on the ground. In fact, there was not even any prohibition against painful holds. Now, painful holds, even as we saw with how submission holds were treated in early catch wrestling, people didn't generally like to see the brutality. Victorian society and pre-Victorian society was a little bit on the prudish side, and they didn't necessarily want to see a lot of that brutality. So a lot of submission holds, a lot of painful holds, as it were, wouldn't necessarily have been favored, except to move somebody. People wanted to see kind of a good, clean stand-up fight, and I totally get that. But the fact is that stand-up grappling was allowed. You were allowed to actually throw a man to the mat, because there was no three knockdown. Of course, there's no three knockdown rule anymore either. But there was no three knockdown rule back then. The rounds weren't standardized. It was just like, you had 30 seconds to get up if you got knocked down. And hey, that's kind of cool, right? So you could just keep hocking a man down if need be while he's trying to hit you. And you could fight in the clinch. Now, some bare knuckle organizations allow some striking in the clinch, even if it's just for a limited time limit. And I'm okay with limiting the amount of clinch time. I'm okay with that, because we don't want it just to turn into a Greco-Roman match. But we should be able to see people hold and hit. We should be able to see that kind of work. And I really like the idea of the addition of takedowns. Even if you're not allowed to do anything on the ground, absolutely nothing on the ground, the idea of allowing takedowns is a really cool idea, because every single traditional martial art, including boxing, every one of them that was a striking art also allowed takedowns. Every single one of them. So having a striking sport that also allows clinch fighting and takedowns basically allows for a format for every traditional martial art to get in there and do the thing. Now, you might be thinking, well, we already have that. It's Lethwei rules, right? Kind of. I think Lethwei rules are fine, and I would not be opposed to that being kind of more common. In fact, I would like to see that be more common. And again, they allow wrist wraps too. Get rid of the wrist wraps. I would also, I'm totally okay with kicking, which the old London Prize Ring rules were not okay with. Well, that's a whole thing. See my other video on the history of boxing. But let's just say that they didn't like kicking. Whether it was legal or not is an argument to be had, but they didn't like kicking. And I'm totally okay with it, especially being more on the French side of this argument. I'm totally down for kicking. I think kicking is great. So, but at that point, yeah, it's starting to look like Lethwei rules. So, you can make arguments for varying ways of doing this, and some people might say, well, hey, can you, is it going to be differentiated from this or that? And at some point, yeah, to the uninitiated fan, they might not see enough of a difference. But to those of us who are within, right, are you making the sport for the spectators, or are you making the sport for the fighters? If the sport is for the fighters, then even those minute amounts of variation matter a lot. If you're making it for the spectators, it might not matter as much, and then it's just going to be kind of whatever falls in place with whatever the zeitgeist is. That's another argument to be had for another time. But my main argument is really just the fact that I really want to see a restoration of the London Prize Ring rules, or something much closer to that. And so, like, my big arguments here are I want to see the stand-up grappling uh, and clinch fighting, and I want to see those wraps get ditched. I want to see a true human contest, natural, drug-tested human contest with no support gear beyond the shoes on their feet and the shorts they're wearing to cover up their junk. Beyond that, I don't, I want to see a human contest. I don't want to see a robot contest. And so, while I am just ecstatic that Bareknuckle is starting to get respected more and that people are finally realizing, hey, this is actually safer. It might be bloodier and uglier, but it is safer, especially long term for the athletes. I am all for that. So, good first step, not far enough. Let's see where it goes. I will talk to you guys later. Good journey. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, share, give the dog a bone. You can follow us on our other social media accounts, and if you really like us, you can head over to Amazon and buy a shirt. You can also go over to Gumroad and purchase some of our instructional courses. All of the links will be provided and also on our website. If you happen to be in the Phoenix area, we would love to meet you. Come drop in for a class, even just to chat. And if you're looking for a new home, we would be happy to have you. So until next time, good journey.